One of the charges against Donald Trump, and I'm not making this up, this is one of the actual charges against Donald Trump, is that he paid too much in taxes. That's right. Overpayment of taxes is a charge. They're not charging him with tax fraud. They're charging him with overpayment of taxes. They are charging him with fraud as well, but they're charging him with fraud on the basis of a crime that can't lead to fraud. Let me explain this one for you. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand. Fraud is a common law crime that is then placed into statutes. Fraud is a crime that came about in the English common law system over time, and it has elements that must be proven. You have made a statement. The statement is deceitful. You knowingly made the statement to cause another person to rely on it to that person's detriment. You knowingly made a deceitful statement with the intent to have another person rely on that statement to their detriment. The way they want to charge Donald Trump with fraud is to say he made internal document notations on his accounting and his books. Private corporate documents that no one else saw. Even progressive lawyers in New York who do business law say you can't charge someone with fraud for this. Why? It's pretty obvious. If it's a private document no one else saw, how can it be a statement made to induce others to commit fraud? You actually do have to prove these elements to get him on fraud, and you can't prove he made a statement with the intent for another person to rely on that statement when the statement was a documentation privately in the corporation that no one else saw. It's not even a matter of you coming out and say, well, maybe they're going to prove someone saw it. No. They're not even making the case that someone saw it. They're trying to say because he essentially cooked the books internally, that's fraud. But no one saw them. In fact, what they're saying is the reason Donald Trump overpaid his taxes was to be able to cover up payments to someone else that shouldn't have been deductible. So essentially, they're saying Donald Trump treated the payment to Stormy Daniels as a tax-deductible business expense, but paid the taxes on it to the state as if it wasn't deductible. So he said it was, he claimed it as deductible, but paid the taxes on it. But somehow that commits fraud. This doesn't make any sense. Business lawyers in New York who are progressive, who hate Donald Trump, they're like, this is crazy. This has never been done. There's no case law on this. It's never been tried. Why would you do this against a former president? You can't meet the requirements to make a fraud case, a knowing public statement designed to induce other people to their detriment to do something when the statements were private, not public. No one saw them. I've had a lot of Democrats in the last 96 hours lecture me that I must not care about justice if I don't want this Alvin Bragg indictment to go forward. And my response is, I do care about justice. Therefore, I don't think you should stretch it so far, the law so far that it tears. A lot of the people who are hand-wringing about justice have already moved on and said, what about the next cases? That's how bad this is. Even progressives, you got Ian Millhauser, the idiot kid at Vox who wrings his hands all the time about Republicans in the Supreme Court, is like, this is a bad case. The Politico was the first one to point out they're charging him with overpaying taxes. And then this is the kicker. This is the nutshell. For those of you who say this is a big deal and we should be concerned about it because of justice, how are you, who cares so much about justice, you insist this be pursued, how are you okay with the district attorney saying there are underlying crimes upon which these charges are based, and he refuses to reveal the underlying crime? Again, it's not made up. He says that all of these charges, these 37 counts, come because of underlying crimes that they're tied to that amount to felonies. They won't actually say what those are. They released a separate statement from the charges explaining the case, and they mention other felonies that are foundational to the case, but they won't tell us what those other felonies are. How can you charge someone in the United States of America with a crime and tell them we're not telling you the crime? You care about justice and you're going to get away with that? You're okay with that? I don't care who you are. I know some of you are desperate to get Donald Trump, but if you can't see how bad it is that the district attorney says there are underlying crimes that these are related to, but then refuses to tell us what the underlying crimes are, that is a witch hunt. Alvin Bragg says we can't normalize these sorts of things.
A New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct.
We cannot normalize serious criminal conduct. Alvin Bragg has been allowing violent felons, including murderers, to get out of prison. Alvin Bragg has allowed violent felons to go unpunished. But you got to listen to this again. You need to, I got to play this for you again. You need to hear this.
A New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime.
Intent to conceal another crime. That's one.
That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes.
Other crimes. He won't tell us what the other crimes are. Do you understand why that's a problem? 34 false statements designed to cover up other crimes. They asked him, what are the other crimes? He won't say. That they will be proven in due course. You can't do that. Under the American criminal law system, you have to present everything to the defendant. The defendant here, Donald Trump, is going to ask for a bill of particulars, and he's probably going to say, well, it could be this crime or it could be that crime. The judge won't let him get away with that. You don't go to court to test a hypothesis with the jury when you're a prosecutor. You go to court to say, he violated this crime. That's not how it's done in the American justice system. Those of you who are Democrats who want to get Donald Trump, you're taking the bury the SOB approach to this. You can't bury him when the DA can't tell you what the actual underlying crime is. Andrew McCabe, Van Jones, Ian Millhauser, Ruth Marcus at the Washington Post. Ruth Marcus, the liberal who Donald Trump excoriated repeatedly in public. She hates him. This is her. She's the editor of the Washington Post. The indictment and the accompanying recitation of underlying facts offers almost nothing in the way of new evidence against Donald Trump, which leaves open the question of whether New York State prosecutors can transmogrify this conduct into a state crime. Answer, maybe. Don't be fooled by the 34 counts. That healthy sounding number doesn't signify anything about the strength of the case. They will all rise or fall together depending on whether prosecutors' theories of the case hold up. And the theory is this: New York law makes it a crime to falsify business records. Ordinarily, that's a misdemeanor. But if the falsification is done with the intent to defraud and intent to conceal another crime, it becomes a felony. Okay, but what are the other crimes Trump is accused of covering up? The indictment doesn't say. But Bragg was asked on Tuesday and offered a few possibilities. He said the doctored records violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. But that's not well-trodden legal theory. If understood correctly, there is certain circularity to saying a false statement on corporate books becomes a felony, not a misdemeanor, because state election law makes it a misdemeanor to promote a candidacy. Moreover, it's not all clear it violates federal law. As Joshua Stanton, Norman Eisen, Dania Perry, and Fred Wertmacher wrote on the Just Security website, the only appellate court in New York to have considered the meaning of offense found that it applies only to New York crimes. In other words, in New York, you cannot prosecute someone for violating federal campaign finance law. The state of New York's judges and state law in New York says if a person is running for federal office, state prosecutors can't prosecute that person for violations of campaign laws. That's clear, settled law in New York State, and yet Alvin Bragg is trying it. I know Democrats want to get Donald Trump. I got it. I know multiple Democrats don't care. But do you want to burn the system down? Do you want to burn everything down just to get Donald Trump? If you burn it all down to get Donald Trump, what's left to protect you if you don't get Donald Trump? What's left to protect you from a Ron DeSantis? You can't charge Donald Trump with a series of charges related to underlying crimes that you can't articulate. You can't charge Donald Trump in New York law with anything related to federal campaign crimes. And Alvin Bragg is refusing to tell us what his actual theory of the case is, other than this was to induce fraud related to underlying crimes. What are the underlying crimes? He's not telling us. That tells you everything you need to know. He's screwing this case up. There are cases Trump needs to worry about, but it's clear this isn't one. And the punchline, the next hearing on this case isn't even going to be until December. The Democrats want to drag this out to the election. That might actually help Donald Trump, given how trumped up the charges are against him.